My guest today is Mike Riemer, the Senior Vice President of the Network Security Group and Field CISO at Ivanti. Mike, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Let me set just a little bit of context for our discussion today. Since November, there's been 15 reported nation state attacks worldwide by hacking organizations inside Russia and China. The Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, has a running list of all the significant cyber incidents since 2006. Most recently, in January, CSIS says there were reports of Russian hackers going after Italian diplomats, Chinese groups going after Taiwan's government systems and telecommunications infrastructure, just to name two recent examples. Federal agencies and critical infrastructure providers are not immune to these threats, too. I'm sure you remember the recent Treasury Department's cyber troubles. And there's probably several other incidents that is forcing agencies and other organizations to address this ever increasing and changing cyber threat. Still, the most often attacked vector for agencies remains email phishing, while website or web-based application attacks are the second most often used vector, according to the Government Accountability Office's report in 2024. Add to this the increased use of ransomware, the recognition of software and API vulnerabilities, and agencies, they're facing a continuing deluge of threats and challenges. So, for more about how agencies and other organizations can do more to get ahead of those attackers, Mike from Ivanti, let's start with some basics. I described all this risk. What are you all seeing about that increased risk? What are some of those trends?
Oh, we're seeing the same things. I mean, the threat from nation-state actors targeting the U.S. government, U.S. critical infrastructure has grown significantly in both scale and sophistication, especially in the last 24 months. Countries like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, they've been actively developing and advancing cyber capabilities amid infiltrating federal systems, disrupting critical infrastructure, and stealing sensitive information, including intellectual property and classified data. These actors are often employing tactics such as zero-day vulnerabilities, spear phishing campaigns, and supply chain compromises to bypass security measures and remain undetected. The rise of geopolitical tension has further emboldened these nations to use cyber attacks as tools of espionage, sabotage, and influence operations to undermine U.S. interests globally. So compounding these issues is the interconnected nature of government systems, where vulnerabilities in smaller departments can lead to breaches in agencies holding much higher value data. And to defend against these persistent and evolving threats, the U.S. government is increasingly focusing on bolstering its cybersecurity posture and fostering collaboration with private sector experts and deploying cutting-edge technology to detect and mitigate nation-state attacks before they cause irreparable harm. Ivanti is proud to, be partnering with many federal agencies in these efforts as we see, this increased attack on the federal space.
Couple things to back out of that. When you talk about the increased sophistication, what does that look like these days? I know you'll have to mention those two letters that everyone's tired of hearing about AI, but what other sophistication, what has changed over the last few years in terms of the sophistication of the attacks?
Well, number one is the threat actors themselves have changed. Where we used to have individual groups that we were working against, what we're seeing now is these threat actors are now creating cyber gangs. Where you have one group that will actually do the penetration of the system, and then they'll turn it over to another group to do exploitation, and yet even another group to do a deep dive into the infrastructure of the network that they've gained access to try and find that intellectual property. And then, potentially, release ransomware into the environment. So these cyber gangs, now they take the best of each one of those talent sets and they move them to their own groups, and now they're working together in conjunction with each other. So they have the best penetration teams working against us. And so forth with each one of the teams. So that's a major change that we've seen is the creation of these cyber gangs. The other one that we're seeing is again, that two-letter acronym that's always around is AI. And mostly in some of these spear phishing campaigns, what we're seeing is the use of AI in order to create a message, an email message, a text message, a communication that goes to a potential target that looks real. It used to be, the prince from some foreign country wants you to donate X amount of dollars, or the text message from your CEO telling you to go buy some Amazon gift cards and send them to them. Those are no longer what we see. Now we actually see what looks like a tangible email, convincing, coming directly from your financial institution, citing personal data about your account and the information that you would assume only that bank has or that financial institution has. But in fact, it's information that's being collected from the internet using AI, in developing that campaign against you as an individual, not just a generic that's spraying.
I miss those days of the foreign prince telling me if I just give him $10,000, I could get $50 million. I mean,
Exactly,
that
exactly.
those are now we look back, those were the good old days. I think it's like, the TV dinners of the 50s. The it's interesting you talk about the cyber gangs. I had not heard a lot about this. Why do you think that came about as a matter of risk, and how are agencies able to deal with it? Because if one part of the gang that's really good at penetration goes in, and the other part of the gang that's really good at data exfiltration comes in, they're probably coming in from different IP addresses. They're probably coming in with different signs and TTPs. What does this do for kind of agencies to say, how do we guard against it?
Yeah, I mean, it becomes almost insurmountable. At sometimes it feels that way. I think the reason the cyber gangs came about is they're in a business, and their business is to steal our business. And so the way they are successful at their business is they go out and they recruit the best of the best in order to come after us. So we have to do the same thing on our side. And I know we're doing a lot of education, a lot of training, and a lot of getting up to speed from a cybersecurity perspective, and utilizing a lot of the agencies that we do have in place that have specialists in these places, so that we can focus on those areas of the government that are, high target and our critical infrastructure segments that we have. But it comes down to working with the private sector, working with the software vendors that are creating solutions that are out there, and working through the secure by design mantra that we have to make sure that the solutions that we're providing from the ground up are secure. And then, like a lot of solutions at the federal government that are a little bit long in tooth, going back to those solutions and modernizing them and making sure that we're moving the systems that have been approved for a long time to a new standard of security.
I want to go back to the secure by design, but before we do that, we'll talk about this idea of understanding what's been approved for a long time and a new standard of security. I think the first step, obviously, is the role of asset discovery. What do you have on your network, and where is it, and who's using it? Walk me
Yep.
through the importance of that. This is something we have been talking about for quite a while, but is there a new or newfound ideal that, hey, we never really did a great job and now we have to do a better job? Or I'll throw the other side of the coin at you, because of laptops and mobile devices and tablets and there's more and more, and that's why it's becoming more important.
It's both of them actually. I mean, it's one of those when you turn around, and we've talked about asset discovery for years, and through the industry, and folks have been looking at, you can't secure what you don't know. So you've got to know what you have on your network. You got to know what's there, and that's kind of the first step. And what we're finding is that when you go out with an asset discovery system, there's usually about 20% of the devices that are discovered that the network and admins had no idea was on their network. And this is shadow IT type of devices. This is also old legacy devices that they'd thought had been decommissioned and removed from the environment, and they're still sitting there, and some of them with internet access. And then it's a lot of what we would call IoT, or Internet of Things. These IoT devices can even masquerade themselves as a vending machine, because a vending machine nowadays, you can go and slip in a debit card and pay with debit card versus cash. Well, how does it run that debit card transaction? and does it through an internet connectivity. And so those devices are on the corporate network or on a segment of the corporate network, hopefully secured off from the rest of everything else. But often they're not. And this is where an asset management system can come into play to let you know exactly what's on the system, where it's located at, and also what version of code of operating system or code is running on that solution. So that as you're looking at what is your overall attack surface from a corporate perspective, you can look at those devices and determine, what is my risk for running that, soda machine on my network, and can it be hacked and can it be utilized in a nefarious way by a threat actor? So those are some of the things that we've talked about in the past, but now, as you said, as we get more and more and more devices coming onto the network, and a lot of folks want to use personal devices because of the fact that you have security policies in place for the corporate asset or the government-owned asset. Now they want to take their personal device because it's less secure, it's easier, it's faster. I don't have to jump through as many hoops to use it. And like all good users, they will find a way around every security practice you put in place.
Appreciate you mentioning the IoT devices. We've talked a lot about operational technology and that side of it. So alarm systems, elevators, SCADA, and the like. That's getting a newfound look. In fact, I know both several different initiatives. Zero Trust, as an example, through DoD, they're having a whole overlay for OT systems. Is that where a lot of this 20% is being discovered? That, oh, I didn't know that OT system or that IoT system is being connected, or are we still finding servers and closets that I didn't know we had because somebody needed a quick server and they brought it up? Or are you going to tell me both?
Yeah, both. I mean, it's one of those situations where a lot of the devices that we're seeing coming on is that are unknown is shadow IT type stuff, where somebody just doesn't have a strong enough Wi-Fi signal, and they want to be able to connect up, so they turn around and go to Best Buy and grab a device, and they come and they plug it into the Cat5 output, and spin it up and set up their own little Wi-Fi hotspot for themselves in their area of the office. These are the types of things that we're seeing. Also, those older legacy systems that we thought were shut down, but yet they're still sitting in the closet humming away. But interesting you say, especially with the OT systems that are out there, a lot of air gap networks that we used to consider to be extremely secure because they were air gapped are no longer effectively air gapped because of OT systems. And you end up having to have some level of connectivity from a remote perspective in order to maintain and manage that air gap network. And that closes that bridge that used to be very, very wide. When you had air gap was air gap, and you had to manually transfer things into the air gap network. Now you can't do that as easily any longer. So there are, exceptions being made, and those exceptions create security risk.
I really think agencies are just starting to get their head around that new risk that you just brought up, going tagging back to the front end of our conversation. Just real quick, because we're running up against break, how much of this discussion about IoT, OT devices are you having with customers these days? Is it gone from a little bit to a whole lot, or is it about even with IT systems? Just give me a sense of what you're hearing from customers.
It's actually starting to pick up, I would say, especially in the last 12 to 18 months. I'm starting to hear a lot more, especially in supply chain. And when I say that, I don't mean as in how software is coming together. I mean as in the loading docks and the trucks and the information, the devices that are used to track shipments coming on and in and out of buildings. All of those types of devices, which we call supply chain management solutions, have never really had any type of security parameters around them because they were considered to be, protected networks or off-network type of solutions. But nowadays, you have direct communication in with corporate network on that supply information so that as those trucks roll in and product is coming off, that information is going directly into some inventory asset management solution on the corporate network, which means that all of those handheld devices which used to be hardened single-use devices, which are now mobile devices running Android or Apple OS, and they're out there scanning these codes, and all of that information is being broadcast across open Wi-Fi networks. So there's a lot of inherent risk that has come there, especially with these types of inclusions, as it were, into the modern day of technology.
All right, Mike, you opened the door to talk about mobile device management because that's another big piece of this. But first, we'll take a quick break. We come back, we'll jump into that discussion as well. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. Well, welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Mike Riemer, the Senior Vice President of Network Security Group and Field CISO at Ivanti. Now, Mike, before break, we were talking about role of asset discovery. You mentioned two big things, secure by design, but also you mentioned the importance of how mobile devices are playing a bigger role, and those that were once potentially not connected to the internet now are being connected to the internet. So let's start with those mobile device challenge. How is this risk changing, and what can agencies do?
Yeah, so it's mobile devices being part of our daily activities in the workforce has become the norm. Like I said, before the break, we were talking about supply chain management solutions and how those handhelds were often, had a specific device or a specific use case, and they weren't, a quote unquote internet-facing smartphone. But now today, just about everybody has an internet-facing smartphone in their back pocket, and they're utilizing it for work activities on a daily basis, whether it's just email or it's text messaging or communications, that type of thing, but also running applications and having direct activity with corporate resources on the network and network resources. So making sure that those MDM devices, those mobile devices that are being managed and having a security policy on them to protect them from malware, protect them from threat actors and bad stuff happening to the device itself, and then having it connect to your corporate network or your network, but also to make sure that that device is allowed onto the network and allowed to talk to those at those resources. So it's a two-prong approach when we talk about MDM. It's not only managing the device from a security posture and ensuring that it is maintaining its security so it can connect to the network, but then making sure that any communication that it has is authorized and what is the level of sensitive data that is allowed to communicate with and interact with on the systems. So those are things that, from a perspective that we have in Ivanti and in our product portfolio, we've had a solution in place with the U.S. federal government through DISA for over a decade, and we utilize that to manage mobile devices. There's some 200,000 devices that are currently being managed from this solution in order to ensure that those devices are secure, that they have secure connectivity to the networks, and that they're being utilized in the appropriate means and fashion that they were designed. This keeps the BYOD type of devices from connecting to the corporate or to in this case, government networks, and making sure that it is only those devices that are being managed by this solution that are connecting.
We've been focused on cell phones, whether it's an iPhone or an Android phone, for many, many years. Are you starting to see agencies asking about those devices at the warehouse that you mentioned, those RFID devices that maybe at one point would collect it internally, then you'd have to upload the data so it's not going over a Wi-Fi? Is that the latest kind of, hey, can we get an MDM on that or other similar devices?
Yes, and actually, right now, majority of the devices that we have MDM on that are associated with government networks are Android based, and we just started working with Apple, or if I should say, finished working with Apple, and have now a functioning solution in order to allow Apple devices to be utilized and managed by our solution. That was kind of a tricky business because, as anybody that knows Apple, they love their iCloud and they don't want to have a device released from the iCloud but we managed to convince them to do that. So the device checks into iCloud, and then it's turned over to our MDM solution for management from that point forward, and no longer communicates. So it does meet the governmental requirements for high-risk networking, and we're able to move those Apple devices onto the corporate network. So
But
that's kind of a little bit more important to some folks in the government, to make sure their Apple iPad is on the corporate net or on the government network. But yes, we're also seeing it where these devices that used to be special purpose type devices that are now turned into mobile cellular type of solutions, that they need those to be secured as well.
But even if we go one step outside of the Android and Apple, I was really thinking about those devices again in the warehouse, right? Hey,
Mhm.
the inventory, the ray guns, but they're not called that. I know that. To okay, this is what's in this pallet. Move the pallet. Make sure it's in the inventory now. Move on. I was
Right.
thinking more of those types of devices
Well, and
too.
that's what that's what I think we're saying. We're talking about the same thing here. Is those used to be the way to do it. You know, you used to have the scan gun that you scan the barcode on the outside of the pallet so that it could add it into the inventory. That is now a mobile phone with an app, and they use the camera on the app to or on the phone to interface with the app on the phone, and they're scanning the barcode and using that through an app on an iPhone or on an Android phone. And so those special purpose devices that we used to not worry about security have now just become a smartphone. And now we have to worry about, is it bleeding information off to some Wi-Fi or internet while they're connected and processing sensitive data.
Okay, that's a helpful explanation. I mean, all this the cell phone has replaced your need for a flashlight, or your need for a watch, your need for all these other devices. It makes sense that it also now that those scanner guns too. Part of this is this idea, and you mentioned this earlier, secure by design. Let's go down that path a little bit. This has been a big push across the federal agencies over the last, say, 18 months or so. What are you starting to see about secure by design? How are either companies like Ivanti or the partners you work with really taking this much more maybe seriously than in the past, or those secure by design principles really are starting to be influencing your approach to developing new technology?
So secure by design is fundamentally, a concept that was started quite a while ago, and we called it shift left at that point in time. It was, instead of waiting until you finish developing a solution and then testing it, to shift left and start thinking about security before you even designed it. We've actually implemented more of what's being called a shift everywhere. And this is that we start testing modularly within the creation of the software. And so as we're developing it and walking through it, not only do we think about the security at the beginning, but as we're developing it, we're testing and validating the security of the solution all the way through. So a shift everywhere type of approach. But secure by design kind of goes a little step further than that, and it kind of goes into secure by default concepts, which is that when create a solution and I provide that solution, and somebody takes and plugs it in for the first time, by default, that configuration should be secure. There shouldn't be any open policies. There shouldn't be any, standard passwords. And years ago, you used to go to Best Buy and you'd pick up a Wi-Fi router and you'd bring it home and plug it in, and 99% of the people would never go in and set it up. So you had the default Wi-Fi configuration with the default password, and that's published out on the internet for support reasons. And so anybody and their brother could hack into your Wi-Fi router. This is what is meant by secure by default, making sure that you're prompting the user for a one-time password, or you're prompting the user to put in a special type of configuration setting that's only and unique to them. And this is what secure by design asks us to do, is to be secure by default and get rid of those default configurations that are in the systems, and making sure that it is secured by default. Also, the other big issue, or big thing, I wouldn't say issue, but big thing with secure by design, two things. We have eliminating full classes of vulnerabilities. and driving through software. This is especially important to the software vendors that have legacy systems out there that we're continuing to use on a daily basis. We need to drive through that code and make sure that we're looking for specific classes of vulnerabilities, whether that's like SQL injection or remote code executions. We need to go through that and make sure that we're driving those types of vulnerabilities out of the solutions. And then the other one is, and I think is very, very important, is the adoption of security patches. Um, as we stated, threat actors are getting more and more sophisticated, and they're getting more intelligent, and they're utilizing AI to make their attacks more meaningful. What we're seeing is when I, as a vendor, put out a version of code, the threat actor is taking that version of code. Decompilers available on the internet now are over 99.99% accurate in decompiling software. And so we're decompiling the software. They're able to do a diff, as it were, from my previous release. And so now they can see every change that I've made in my software code between two releases. And then they're able to take those changes and they can start looking in those changes to see if there's anything they can attack. And so this is where it becomes critical for vendors that are producing software to be transparent and communicate what their vulnerabilities or weaknesses are in their code as they release their new patches. Because then defenders understand, oh, okay, if I don't apply this patch, or even if I do apply this patch, here's the things that threat actors are going to be going after because they've been announced by that vendor. And part of that comes down to education for customers, is that they have to understand there's two types of CVEs out there. One CVE is the bad one, which is the zero-day exploit. That's when threat actors found it before anybody else did, and they're using it to get into the systems. The other one is the vendor announced transparency CVE. These are the ones that come out, on a regular basis with the releases, and it's saying, hey, this was a vulnerability in our solution. We patched it, we fixed it, and hello, everybody, here is the issue we found and we fixed. Now, we're trying to get that information into the hands of the defenders, those guys that are protecting us and protecting the software and protecting the solutions. But at the same time, it ends up in the bad guys' hands. So the bad guys know we're there. And it takes them, with AI, less than 30 days, and they know how to exploit it. So that's where being flexible, being agile, and being able to implement security patches in a quick way is very imperative for network administrators.
Mike, and we have just a few minutes left, and I just want to hit upon one topic because you kind of built us to from MDM to secure by design to how agencies can be more proactive. In the last couple of minutes together, just give me a sense of what you're seeing about what are some of those steps that agencies can take to be more proactive.
So I think what it is for customers as a whole is they need to have a very good communication channel with their vendors. Make sure that they're looking at and communicating with the vendor and know when a patch comes out. They review that. Not all patches, not all issues in a patch are going to be relevant to that agency. They need to look at their configuration. They need to look at their network, determine if that patch is something that is critical for them. Now, that doesn't mean look at the CVSS score of a vulnerability, which everybody does. And it's like, oh, it's a 9 dot something that's critical. I've got to get it in the next 24 hours. Not necessarily. It may be a vulnerability that's in an area of code that you're not even using, or it's dormant because you haven't configured that. So it really needs to understand by looking at the release notes. And I know read the manual, but we all know what read the manual means. So, but it is, in fact, agencies need to be looking at what is the vendor telling me to do. Let me review what they're doing and follow their steps as they're asking you to do it. I think that's what agencies can do, because we know that from a vulnerability management transparency perspective, vendors are being more transparent. They're publishing more CVEs, and they're letting the agencies know what's going on with their solution, and the agencies should be paying attention.
Mike, we got about 30 seconds left. I'm going to give you the last word. We've hit a bunch of different really important topics around cybersecurity. What's the one thing you want to make sure people walk away with from our conversation?
I think the biggest thing that folks can walk away with is know that Ivanti is at the forefront of this fight with threat actors. And we have not only changed our internal processes on how we do business and have adopted secure by design throughout our infrastructure, as far as our workers and our developers and our processes. But our solutions that we have each and every day, we are updating and upgrading and moving those solutions into a modern world of attack landscape. And with threat actors getting more and more prevalent every day, that means that we have to be more and more diligent every day.
As you see, I think you summed it up well. Diligent threat actors are getting harder, and of course, agencies and industry partners like yourself have got to kind of keep up with them. Unfortunately, we are out of time for today, and we will have to keep up with you another time. So let me thank my guest. Michael Riemer is the Senior Vice President of the Network Security Group and Field CISO at Ivanti. Mike, thanks so much for taking the time.
No problem, Jason. Appreciate it.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search innovation.